Well, without further ado, let's just bring Brad on and get to chatting with him. Well, might be some sound issues. Brad, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
We
Perfectly.
Can. Yes.
Hi, Brad. Welcome to the show.
It's great to be with you. Thanks for the invitation to your show.
Well, thank you. And for your staff for staying on top of it. I know scheduling has been difficult on my end. And so I really, really appreciate you working around us. So thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. We're really happy to be here.
Yes. So you throwing your hat in the ring to take Romney's slot.
First of all, tell us what brought that decision on.
Yeah. Well, it was not a decision we made lightly, but our state is a remarkable place. It's a place that we all love, and we're still one of those places that we believe in individual responsibility and small government and low taxes, and we need to keep it that way. Not just here, but we need to take that mentality to Washington, where things are very different, and that's why we're running, is to take some sanity back to Washington.
Fantastic.
Sounds like you hit the understatement of the year with that. Things are very different.
And please stop talking about how great Utah is. I mean, only people will come, and we just got such a great thing going.
Utah's that perfectly square state that's right next to Montana and Idaho, above Colorado.
Thanks for the geography lesson there.
And that other state that kind of looks like a fat L.
Hey, Brad, so what did you see you could bring for Utah that Romney wasn't bringing? Or did you think he was doing fine and just saw the seat was open?
Well, we launched an exploratory committee last April, partly because there was a lot of clamor from folks wanting me to jump in this race. And I think that the reason that they were pushing me is they saw a very strong, consistent track record of someone that ushered in record tax cuts, for example, in the state of Utah. We didn't cut taxes once or twice or three. We cut them 3 times for the biggest tax cuts in Utah's history. And yet we still balanced our budget while doing that. And the list of other kind of conservative accomplishments goes on. But that was part of the reason why so many recommended or pushed me to do it. And my wife and I finally decided last year to jump in, because we know that there are opportunities for our country to be better. And there's also, I think, opportunities for Utahns to feel like their voice is heard more back in Washington, D.C.
That's great.
Yes, it is. I have consternation with D.C. because I wonder what's the possibility, what's a roadmap that can be used to right this ship. I don't want to, be a ghost looking at the history books in 100 years and reading the story of the United States and having it a story of collapse and ineptitude that we seem to read about Rome or about the Netherlands, all that. What's a roadmap to rescue that?
Well, I think your concern is a valid one. And if you look at failed societies, over centuries, one of the things that is a common denominator there is that their government lost their way, and government tried to do things that it shouldn't do. And unfortunately, we've got enemies we've got enemies all across the globe. But I think one of our biggest enemies right now is these leftist policies back in Washington, D.C., that are trying to create a government that is not sustainable, a government that does things that government should never do and gets in the middle of people's lives and makes life harder. And when that starts to happen, societies are at risk. And so, you're talking about this as if I know you're sincere and you wouldn't bring it up. But some people talk about this type of thing in the abstract. I think this is a real threat. Yeah. If we don't get government back in the place that it was intended to be, our country is in trouble. And there's so many examples of what that looks like. And I'll just give you, you pushed a button, so I'm going to go for a second here. But I've spent a lot of time traveling the state, not just as Speaker of the House, which I did for 5 years, but as a candidate for the U.S. Senate. And it doesn't matter whether I'm talking to families or businesses across the state. Almost everywhere I go, people are telling me stories about how the federal government has caused problems for them. And here's what's interesting. It's not because Congress has done something to them. It's because Congress hasn't been doing their job. And Congress has delegated and ceded authority to these bureaucracies
Bureaucrats. Yeah.
and these agencies back in Washington and empowered them. And they're making decisions and controlling our lives. And that's not how government should work.
Well,
So we've got
they're
to get,
literally taking our freedom.
that's right.
And these bureaucrats, they stay in the same place. You may be a senator for 5, 10 terms, 1 term. They always keep their jobs. It's nearly
right.
impossible to fire them. And
Oh, we don't need to talk about Fauci today.
but honestly, Brad, people don't understand that a senator, you're one of 100 people.
Yeah.
So it is a huge job, but yet it can also be a very lonely job when you're a conservative like Mike Lee, or you're a conservative like Rand Paul, and you're trying to speak truth to power. You're trying to empower the public. But it's such a fine line right now because it feels like this is by design, the left. It's by design they're trying to fundamentally change our government by their decisions. And they're not saying it out loud, but you're seeing socialist ideals and laws coming out that essentially, if we were in Rome right now, we'd be in the final stages of an immoral people with overreach on government, and the people either rise up or they are victims of their government.
Yeah, that's right, Holly. And the best thing that can happen to folks with a leftist agenda is to watch what's happening to our country right now when Congress doesn't do its job and it allows bureaucrats and these alphabet soup agencies to dictate our lives, because that's the next step in this progression. You know, I was down in Gunnison 2 weeks ago at Christensen Arms. They make some of the finest guns in the world. And their business is being impacted, not because Congress did this to them, but because the Biden administration is anti-Second Amendment,
Right.
and they're trying to strangle the gun industry. And so instead of gun control in the traditional way, in the fourth quarter of last year, the Department of Commerce said, you know what, gun manufacturers, you can't export weapons or ammunitions out of the country. And so, I mean, what does that do to gun manufacturers in this country when you take away the rest of the world for them to have as a marketplace?
I love that when we know our government puts up guns outside of the country to help get involved in wars.
You can't ship weapons out unless it's
other countries, but they can do it. You know,
or other
and
cartels.
The ATF can turn regular citizens into felons by making a call that isn't theirs to make.
Yep.
They're not a governing body.
Yeah. I was with another group, really cool business actually up in Ogden last week, who make these really cool, rugged e-bikes that you would like go on a really long outdoor kind of adventure on. And the Forest Service, same thing, without going through Congress, without going through any process, just decided one day to wake up and say that people couldn't use their products on Forest Service property anymore. And you know, these are entrepreneurs that have risked everything to start their business, and government has become their biggest enemy. I mean, in what world does that make sense?
It's happening in every industry too. And regulations, both state and federal regulations are sometimes they're so compact for a small business that if you don't live in a state like Utah where they're trying to flourish small businesses, and you and the governor have gone out of their way to make it a very welcoming place for business, but still regulations for businesses alone are getting just too much. Yeah. You have to pay more in attorney's fees to keep yourself legal than you can to put out a new product, which makes this country so great.
It's almost like the big box stores have lobbyists that work their way in and change. I don't know if anyone's ever read Upton Sinclair's book, The Jungle. That lays it as clear as it can be. The Jungle, written by a socialist, hoping he'd get that communist reform, And all it did was foster in regulations because corporations saw that and said, I got a good idea. We're going to save millions on inspections.
Oh, that's interesting. So what would you say, coming out of the gate with the ABC agencies and getting them in order, what are you committed to doing? Auditing them, maybe cutting half of them? I mean, the United States government's
Cutting
biggest
them in
employer
half, that's hard.
In the world, or in the country. So how do you get a perfect marriage of being reasonable and overreach?
What about a simple law that says if you step outside of the bounds that Congress has issued you, you go to prison?
Well,
like a steady 6 months.
Half of Washington D.C. would be in prison if we did that.
Doesn't
We'd have
that
to build
sound
more
like
prisons.
heaven? Doesn't that sound like heaven?
So it's such a good question, right? What do you do about this proliferation of government and bureaucracy? And we have got to elect some people back. If we want different results in Washington, we need to elect different people. And the people that a lot of the people that are there right now, not everyone, there's some good people there, but there's far too many people there that don't fundamentally understand the role of a legislative branch. And that legislative branch needs to pull that power back from these agencies. And I have seen, interestingly enough, even here in Utah, where in our House of Representatives, where one or two new members can come in, and if you're dedicated and diligent and relentless, but you also build trust, you can bring people along to your cause and with your cause. And I have to believe that when I get back to the U.S. Senate, that there's going to be an opportunity for me to do that, to help bring people along, to get some of these agencies, quite frankly, should be shut down, not in half, but just completely shut down. But also to make some hard decisions about what government really should be doing. Just as an anecdote, when we had COVID hit a few years ago here in Utah, within 30 days of COVID hitting, the legislature, we went in, I was the Speaker of the House at the time, we went into a special session and we cut $1 billion out of the state of Utah's budget overnight. It affected every department, every agency in the state. At the same time, the federal government was spending money like drunken sailors and printing money, which we're still paying the price for today, by the way, with this inflation. But a lot of those budget cuts that we did, even in the best run state in the country, were budget cuts that are still in place today. And the reason I bring that up is there's so much opportunity to cut fat out of government, even in well-run places. And we know Washington is far from well-run. So big opportunity there to make a difference and not affect government services at all.
If I could you brought up a good point about a new legislator coming in and rallying people behind his ideas because of his ability to work with people, earn their trust. That just reminds me of our very own House of Representatives member, Bridger Bullender. Bridger is he's in us, I don't want to brag too much, but he's my representative and he's a shining star. And so I talk to him often, and I asked him about his first year as a freshman up there. And he said that he couldn't believe it, but the Speaker of the House brought him in, taught him the ropes, taught him how to make good decisions, how to get good bills through. And he said that I never thought in a million years, because him and Tim both went together and they've got our support 1,000%. But he said, I expected something different, something, I don't know, nefarious of how government is. And he was you mentored him, you assisted him, and he was able to get so much done as a freshman. And you liked his ideas, and he was bringing you ideas that he had and wanted to do as a resident of Tooele County. But he shined a big, bright light on you. And I just have to thank you for that. And thank you for well, basically, it seems like that's your character. And I can only imagine a character like that gets to DC. You're going to be disappointed a lot, but hopefully those same traits will bring some of the other side around. Is that possible? Do you think in this day and age, can a person with good character, good morals? I mean, I really appreciate Mike Lee's work. I know he stands alone sometimes, but I like that the United States of America knows his name, and they know he's from Utah and he stands on principle and the Constitution. But I mean, are you prepared to stand on that and be alone, or do you think that we have a shot at getting some Democrats on our side? Because a lot of the Democrats there feel like it's an agenda activist group. It doesn't feel like they're representing the voice of their people.
It's left-wing politics. Left-wing politics. They preach climate change, but it's always left-wing politics who have the worst records on climate. You know, China and the USSR and all that, because they have total control, they can only concentrate on short-term gains.
Well,
it
and
all
they
has
will
to be
toe the
done
line.
now.
Everyone will do the same that their leader tells them. Whereas Republicans, we're all free thinkers, and we're like, hey.
You can't let a foundation naturally occur. You have to have that single party control. We have to do it now, which is a story we'll get into later on. But
I'm wondering,
EVs.
My question is, how do you see yourself going to? I mean, I want to see you get stuff done, and I certainly want to see that Utah is represented by people with character, and that they're not for sale, and Utah's not for sale.
No, it's not. And well, great question. And before I answer it, I will answer it. I just want to also tell you my perspective on Bridger.
Okay.
He's a rising star up there. You said it, but Tooele County is well represented by him and Representative Jimenez, who are working really hard. And, Representative Bollander's business background, as well as just being an amazing human being, is going to give him a lot of influence in the legislature. But I think, and this now to kind of pivot into the answer to your question, a legislative body like the U.S. Senate or up here at our Capitol Hill in Utah is at its best when you have a whole bunch of members that feel empowered, that know how things work, and their ideas are listened to. And it is a debate of ideas. And I believe, I'll find out when I'm there, but I believe that's one of the things that's missing in Washington, D.C. I think that you've got a top-heavy, top-down environment in Washington, D.C. right now, and rank-and-file members do not feel like their ideas matter. And we've got to change that culture back there. And I'm committed to doing that when I get there.
Do you think you could maybe, if it is you up there, you think you could maybe get our Mitch McConnell to step down and get ourselves somebody who actually is going to bring bills to the floor? And I mean, as a Speaker of the House, you know the whole back and forth regarding bills and what's good, what needs to be done, what needs to be fixed. And I hope you don't have bills that are 2,000 pages with 5 minutes to vote on them. And I certainly hope you won't vote on a bill you can't read. I understand that's highly important to you on the Utah governing side.
Yeah, it's not right. The process deserves a lot more respect. The American people expect a lot more from their elected representatives than that. And, time will tell. More than anything, I hope a year from now, when I vote for the new leader of the Republican Senate conference back there, that it is the majority leader, not the minority leader. That matters so much for our country. And we've got to elect a majority leader a year from now that's a Republican, that believes in the process, that believes all voices matter, and that also is a strong conservative, that is going to help us get these bureaucracies out of the places they don't belong, and is going to get our country back on track. And that's those criteria that I just gave you, or the filter that I'm going to use when I vote for whoever the next majority leader is, hopefully back in Washington, because it matters a lot.
It does.
But I will tell you this, it shouldn't matter as much as it does right now. We need to have more people that are empowered from the rank and file of both the House and the Senate to get policy through back in DC.
I appreciate that. I do.
Mhm.
So let's go back to, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I know you've done a lot of work here. Are you currently serving, or you're just running at this point for Senate?
I stepped down as Speaker of the House and a lawmaker in November, and I'm full time on the campaign trail.
Wow. So you get to miss this session of excitement.
Yeah,
Probably
that's
a
right.
little. People are probably still talking to you about it, but I really want to talk about. We'll hit Utah and then we'll go national, if that's
Well,
okay.
I want to ask about these two bills that are making waves right now.
I have one though that I want to talk about.
Do
That's
ya?
his. Yeah, because we're in Tooele County, as you know, and the Great Salt Lake is the home of the businesses out here that we rely on, that the nation relies on in some parts of the world, like with MagCorp and things. They are highly affected by the Great Salt Lake in the health of that lake. I'm wondering if you could tell me what your efforts have been with the Great Salt Lake.
Yeah, it's a kind of a big question, but
Well,
I recognized a number of years ago, before people were really talking about the Great Salt Lake, that we had, I would describe it as an economic and a ecological tsunami about ready to hit us if we didn't pay a little bit more attention to the lake. And from a quality of life standpoint, from the jobs that are out there, which you've mentioned, you do have a lot of industry related to the lake in Tooele County. And so we leaned pretty heavily into it, and we shined a bright light on what was happening on the lake through. I did a Great Salt Lake Summit for 3 years, and we ended up, I think, through that summit and through a lot of legislative focus, making some significant strides in balancing the needs of the state to grow, but also the needs of the Great Salt Lake. And I think we're winning now again, but it's going to be a long fight to get the lake to a spot where it's being taken care of in the right way. But we're definitely winning in terms of the momentum that's there. And you've seen, I don't know what they're going to do this year, but the 2 years prior, over $1 billion invested in water and water infrastructure. The Great Salt Lake's the biggest beneficiary of that, but there are other beneficiaries around the state. I mean, this isn't related to you, but Washington County has got some real water problems. And so we put a lot of effort into Washington County as well. Water matters. There's no bigger issue for the long-term health of the state of Utah than water.
it does out here as well. And our electeds have worked on a water study. And what they found is that we need to unite as a county. All our cities need to connect and get that water to go from each city and kind of share it. But when I see Utah has this many water rights and California is wanting more, and we're the ones that are producing, and we're the ones that have reservoirs and all these other things, they're not, it doesn't feel like they're investing in their infrastructure as much as our state has done to preserve the very precious water. And we were in a drought for 10 years when this bill was starting. And luckily, God prevailed and we got
Yeah,
rain and
that's right.
snow. But can you give me an idea? And I know you've looked into this and you guys have studied this at length, but what is Utah facing if the Great Salt Lake is not there?
Yeah. If the Great Salt Lake gets to critical levels or below critical levels, I think at a minimum, and you're going to see different numbers around this, but you're 20 to 30 billion dollars in costs to remediate a low level of the Great Salt Lake. That does not include the health costs, the cost to our economy, et cetera. And so it's almost incalculable
Right.
what the consequence could be.
Plus, what it would do to our air if that was dust and, just getting into the air, things like that. I'm always curious what.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of heavy metals, if it goes away, will be floating into the atmosphere.
Yeah, with terminal lakes, I mean, the minerals and deposits don't flow downstream anymore, right? So they just settle on the lake bed, and a lot of those minerals are toxic. And that's why this matters. I mean, I could get into a lot of stories, but we've seen instances around the world where terminal lakes have dried up, and the environmental and financial costs and health costs for those surrounding communities have been devastating.
Right. I don't think people realize, it's just a salty lake. They don't understand. And yet we've got businesses like McCore and
McCore,
Cargill,
2 salt plants. I guess
Morton.
ATI is moving on to working on lithium project now. I don't know if they pushed that all the way through, but we've also got a salt plant, GSL, up in Ogden. There's a lot of things that rely on the lake and the natural habitat.
We think there's at least $8 billion worth of industry a year on the lake. That's a sizable part of our economy, actually. But I will just say, I think that we are now on a good path. I mean, there's more work to be done. I tell people, I think we've probably accomplished year 2 to 3 of a 10-year march. So hopefully policymakers up at the Capitol will continue to focus on it, but we're definitely heading in a much better direction.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that our legislators were on top of that. So that's really great. You and I both want to talk about the bills right now.
Well, those 2 bills that came through, the bathroom bill, the bills that have the Democrats dressed in mourning the other day and giving a speech wearing all black, where you've got the bill that restructures DEI so that it is it's constitutional and inclusive, I would argue. It doesn't do away with it, but it just says, look, you can't have all the fun, or you can't peel off and give a whole bunch of credit to one group of people at the absence of another. Now, I haven't been able to read the whole bill because, one, I'm not smart enough to sit down and read. It takes me weeks. And then you've got the gendered bathroom bill, and that's caused quite a ruckus. And I don't know if you got to see those, because I'm sure they've been in process. I know the DEI bill is fairly recent. Representative Hall, I believe is her name.
Katie Hall.
Yeah, she started that, and she's a freshman, isn't she? Or is this her second year?
Representative Hall is a freshman. I actually can speak more to that bill than the others. That bill started last year, and I was heavily involved. And I'll give you a quick story. I was with about 8 speakers of the House, all Republicans, in Texas one day. We got together once or twice a year, and I was talking to this man. I probably won't say which state, but I was talking to the speaker of a very red state, and he said, "Brad, you won't believe what I found in our universities. To apply for jobs, even to be like classified staff, janitors, things like that. In some cases, you have to write this DEI statement about what your thoughts are on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we're going to outlaw that." And I looked at him and I said, "Well, we don't do that in Utah," because I just couldn't imagine we did that in Utah.
Yeah.
But while I was sitting there, I pulled up my laptop and I looked at one of our universities' job postings, and I'll be darned, but we did that in Utah. and so I got on the phone with my chief of staff and I said, "We've got to fix this." And so that actually started about a year and a half ago, and Katie Hall started it. Last year, the bill hit some turbulence and we didn't get it passed. But here's the deal. At the end of the day, there's a fundamental disagreement between the right and the left. And the disagreement is this: do we believe in equal opportunity, or do we believe in equal outcome? I believe in equal opportunity based on merit and hard work, and some people think those matter, but they think that everyone should have the same outcome regardless of merit and hard work. And I just I don't subscribe to that. It's not the cloth that I'm cut from. I don't think that's what Utah believes when it thinks of personal responsibility. And so we need to lean into equal opportunity. And I think that's what these DEI bills are about. It doesn't mean we want no one to be discriminated against. No one.
Right. But we want merit. We want a system that's based on merit for safety above all else.
They're written by the left. And like I said a minute ago, the left is all about short-term gains. It's got to happen now. Where the right, if they wrote a DEI bill, they'd say, all right, we're going to eliminate the box that says what ethnicity you are. And that way hiring is done blindly. Where the left says, no, we're going to make it so they have to hire someone that we feel is dispossessed of the American dream for whatever reason. The right would do it on a foundation of equality. The left would do it on a foundation of giving a stepladder to a certain group to try to build them up, and that's how they'll achieve the same. It happens through history. Every time you look at the left, they've always done this.
And I think it's almost racist to assume or to suggest that a certain group of people need a stepladder. I can't believe that. I can't imagine someone saying, hey, because you're a woman, pat me on the head, we're going to give you a little bit extra. I mean, I know I can hit from the red tees, but other than that, like, we're going to give you a little extra because you're not capable of doing yourself. And yet that's offensive, but the left gets away with it.
Well, and it's also just bad for everybody, right? I mean, we want, when we're hiring professors at our medical school, we want to hire the best professors to train our doctors,
Or pilot.
regardless of their sexual orientation or their race or their gender or anything. And it's just that simple, right? And so, but I have to be fair. I know that the other bill passed today. It changed a whole bunch in the last 24 hours on the bathroom bill, so I don't know what happened. I haven't had
I
a
haven't
chance
been
to
able
catch
to.
up.
I was reading that before we went live, and it's got a whole bunch of protections in there for transgender people, but it sounds like, just from the precursory reading, it sounds like they have to have at least started that medical process. And I understand that you don't want someone. You want to have protections in there for ladies. Let's just go with what it really is, for women to not have a guy who's maybe a little shady between his ears, who says, you know what, I'm going to wear a skirt and I'm going to go loiter in the ladies' bathroom today and see what kind of, fun I can have. And you don't want that opportunity codified in law.
Well, we need to protect girls.
Yep.
That's what this is about. And I'm even talking about transgender men who need protection, because at the end of the day, if they walking into the men's room, I mean, that could put them in some danger too. Locker rooms. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we protect our girls, and I'm shocked
we can go this way,
that this has to be a conversation that has to be moved around to fit. We want safety first, I think.
We could always go with start them on pistol training at 9, get them qualified by 13. At 13 in a day, they get issued that pink Glock. Now I'm thinking we start out with a 43.
Can we go back to you as speaker and COVID? Because a lot of people should have learned a lot of things during that time. What did you learn during that time? And how was that? Because I know everyone can armchair quarterback. I give that right off the bat. No one knew what they didn't know. So I'm curious what it was like for you during COVID. I know you were able to cut money. I also know that the federal government was sending money out to states, and that Utah handled it. Yeah, Utah handled it quite well. I'd like to know your thoughts on how COVID was handled, and going forward, what would be done differently?
Yeah. Well, boy, we all learned a lot in COVID, and it was a hard time. I'm on balance really proud of how Utah managed it. We were one of the first states in the country to reopen our economy up in May of 2020. I mean, think about that. Within 6 weeks of the whole world shutting down, Utah was one of the first places to open up our economy. And that was not easy, by the way.
Right.
We had to push really hard for that. And we never had a statewide mask mandate. We actually went in and more than once in special session pulled back emergency powers from bureaucracies that, quite frankly, did exist in Utah code, but it existed for 20 years and it was never written to be used in a time of a long-term emergency. All the emergency powers were contemplated for 30-day emergencies or less. And a pandemic was something that no one had ever thought of. So we pulled all those back. When you look at, well, I won't say when the Wall Street Journal did an article after COVID and said, who managed COVID the best of all 50 states? It wasn't Florida. It wasn't Tennessee. It wasn't some of these other red states that came out number one. It was Utah. And we didn't pound our chest. We didn't make a lot of bluster about it. We were just quietly doing our job of keeping Utah businesses open, getting our kids back in school. In some cases, really forcefully having to get our kids back in school. I had to go to a pretty toe-to-toe with the Salt Lake School District to get them to get their kids back in school. And that's a different story for a different day. Our health metrics were better. We were the best state in the country to manage COVID. Could we have done some things different? Absolutely. But, we did the best we could. So.
Well, and I think that when Herbert said, we're going to leave this to the counties and go as local as possible, you guys will decide what you want to do. I thought that was wonderful. I also know I watched closely with South Dakota and how they weren't going to close. I mean, Kristi Noem said, you show me in the Constitution where I'm even able to do this. Yeah. And I think governors sometimes we need to have the legislators actually do these special sessions and make sure governors get the guidelines from the state, because you're the voice of your district. And if your district is saying, like ours, I mean, when the council decided about mask mandates, it was standing room only in there. Our county was not going to wear masks. Our county was not going to shut down. And it was a lot to do with our sheriff. He wasn't going to arrest people. And it just felt really nice, because I'm talking to friends in other states where that wasn't even an option. They're getting top-down information, and yet we were given power in the county. And I really, really thought that was great.
Yeah. And we actually even went in and, well, it doesn't matter much, but we went in eventually and even took some of the county's emergency powers away, because we thought, in particular, Salt Lake County was being too assertive with some of their emergency powers in Salt Lake County. And, and we learned a lot. We encouraged masks at the time. We thought that the science was telling us they made a big difference. In hindsight, we realized masks didn't make as big a difference as we thought. But, things still turned out the way they did.
Encouraging masks I don't think that's a step over any line if you encourage something.
Especially if the Department of Health is telling you.
It's when you demand it, when they force it and all that stuff. I don't know. I think Utah did rather well. And it was because you had to go in and fight our metro areas on stuff. That was where all the fight happened.
It was crazy. President Adams and I would get up every day almost early in the morning. We get on the phone with each other. And in one form or fashion, the conversation was, what kind of crazy idea do you think we're going to have to stop today?
Yeah. Well, now on that note, you're in the Senate, and now this Disease X is coming. You know what worked in Utah. You know maybe what didn't. A little bit more, a little bit stronger. In the Senate, what do you think you would gauge from that? And with this experience you have that maybe others don't, you have it on a state level, that you're talking to every legislator in the state, and you're trying every to help and guide and work with. Now you're on a global, like a national level. What could you bring to that seat that maybe someone else can't?
Well, I think you take the lessons that we learned here, right? And we learned that the concept you have to balance everything. And we are still, as a society, in our educational system, paying an irreversible price for pulling kids out of schools.
Right.
We're still paying a price in many businesses that we drove out of business. And and lives can and health can be measured in a lot of different ways. And I think that the thing that we did better than almost anywhere else is we tried to push good information and let people choose for themselves. And
Right.
that's what government should do. We shouldn't be choosing for people. Why, right now, Washington, D.C. is trying to take us down, and I say this a lot, dead end streets. They still want to teach our kids what to think, not how to think. They
Absolutely.
still want to have government handouts instead of free markets. And and we've got to be the protectors of the other side of that. We've got to worry about teaching people how to think for themselves. Let the markets correct themselves. Let the markets be themselves, and let people choose their own destiny. And that's what Utah's built on. And we've got some lessons, I think, to teach the rest of the country.
And I agree with you. And when you live in a state like Utah, where you could be filming a commercial where people think you're in the Swiss Alps, or you could
Yeah.
film a commercial where they think you're in the Sahara Desert because of the landscapes out here. I know a lot of times it was just logic. Go outside, breathe fresh air, don't stop, use this time to be with your families. And I just feel like we were in a even over Texas. I visited Texas during this COVID, and I was really, really proud to live in a state where I felt like I had more freedom during COVID.
I'll tell you, my favorite people during COVID was Texas's lieutenant governor and Idaho's lieutenant governor. Because Texas is what's the lieutenant governor in Texas's name? When he went on the news, and
I actually traveled with him once.
yeah, he
Oh
said,
my heck.
"I'm an old man. I've lived my life. Don't steal my grandkids' lives." He went on the news, and then Idaho's lieutenant governor, when the governor went on a trip to Texas, she jumped in the seat and wrote a whole bunch of anti-COVID laws.
That got her in trouble.
Try to push him through. She just went rogue.
He's like, I went out of town. What happened?
Like, she put on a pirate cape and a hat and a peg leg and a hook hand and went to town. I was like, holy cow, that's insane.
I think I was too busy focusing on things here. I didn't really notice that part, but sounds like it was pretty entertaining. So
it was great.
Let's talk about, I know you're not running for Congress, which is the purse, but Senate, of course, has to control, and vote for things like that. What do you think fiscal responsibility can do from what you've learned here in Utah and taking that to DC? Because I'm sorry, most of this has to do with logic, and I feel like that's lost. Am I wrong? I mean, we bring up logical solutions, and it's like you're telling people that, the world is flat, and everyone's going, oh, that's crazy. But you're like, wait a minute, this is logical.
Yeah. Well, boy, it's like they're speaking a different language back in DC in terms of spending. And there's no requirement in Washington, D.C. for them to spend only what they generate in tax revenues. Big problem. That needs to change. We've got to pass a balanced budget amendment or something like that. That will force hard decisions. And by the way, all these doomsdayers that say that will be terrible for our country are wrong.
Right.
It will be good for our country. Sure, it's some hard medicine to swallow, but I don't know how anyone can look at people in their 20s or 30s right now and not say we are foisting upon them an irreversible problem that they're going to inherit and have to fix because we can't manage the country ourselves. $34 trillion of debt. And it's not that hard. I mean, I'll give you a good example here in Utah. Of course, we have to balance our budget here, but we do even better than that. We basically, in the state of Utah, say that if revenues are coming in above kind of inflation and how the state's growing, those revenues get set aside. And the first thing lawmakers need to do is look at tax cuts for those revenues. And it's just a totally different system than saying, how much revenue do you have? Spend it all.
Right.
And so we do that in Utah. It's why you saw record tax cuts over the last few years. I may have said this, but we didn't cut taxes once, twice. We cut them 3 times when I was speaker, over $1 billion in income tax cuts. And those are dollars that Utah families are spending today on things they care about instead of things lawmakers up on Capitol Hill care about.
Yeah, that's, again, logical. If the government had to run their their income like families do, we'd be in a whole different deal. But when they can print money and they can send it overseas, which gets me to Ukraine, and I really, really want to hit the border with you. I don't know if we want to go over, but I see Ukraine and I see Israel and these outside Taiwan, all these outside interests. And normally, wars have to be decided by Congress, not by a commander in chief. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on our involvement in these outside wars.
Well, the first thing I will say is this. I believe the world would be a more peaceful place if we had stronger leadership in the White House in Washington, D.C. But the weak leadership that we're demonstrating has created opportunity for terrorists and dictators and groups all across the globe to create chaos. And elections have consequences. And the consequence that the world is paying because we've elected Joe Biden is very severe. And we've got to get someone in the White House, and it's going to be President Trump who's going to be our nominee. We need to make sure we don't elect 4 more years of Joe Biden. The world can't take it. Our country can't take it. And then when you talk about all these issues across the world, I have to look at them a little differently from each other. I believe Hamas should be wiped off the face of the earth, and the U.S. should be supportive of that.
Right.
Ukraine is more complicated. Anything we're doing to support Ukraine needs to be done. We've got our priorities backwards. I'm not even saying we shouldn't support Ukraine, but until we secure our border, the conversation about helping Ukraine seems like it's out of sequence.
Yeah,
if
it's
we
like
are going to,
we're paying our neighbor's bill while our house goes into foreclosure.
well, listen, I don't know how either of you feel, but you're both taxpayers. At a minimum, your share of the current border crisis is at least $1,200 a person of what it's costing federal, state, and local government to deal with the border crisis right now. That's $1,200 a person.
And that's just financial. That doesn't even bring in the crime that could happen to you or the danger that is in
the job loss, the job pressure, Democrats are going again.
And the destruction of your cities.
They want bodies on the next census so that California might get a couple more seats back. And they want those Democrat voters. And they're doing it at the cost of their urban voters that they traditionally carried. And they're losing those people.
Well, they are. People are starting to really understand this crisis because they know that you've got terrorists coming across the border. We've got fentanyl coming across the border. It's straining our police. It's straining our government systems. We're all paying a price for this in less security, in more drugs in our country, in our schools being strained. It's inconceivable to me that people in Washington aren't willing to stand up and do the right thing on this issue. But we have to. And if we're going to support Ukraine or these other hot spots around the world, we need a lot more accountability, a lot more transparency. But most importantly, the American people deserve to be told what our strategy is. If we're going to take American resources and help Ukraine, what are we trying to accomplish? And how are we going to define a win? And so these are complex issues, but I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. Strong leadership in Washington creates an environment where these things are less likely to happen.
It's true. And I think auditing the money that's been sent already would be nice. It'd be nice to have a committee that's watching where that money is gone. The fact that it's just constant, it's hundreds of billions now. And if we took even a fraction of that and put it towards the border of this country, we would, get so much more done.
How would Act Blue fund their Democrat Party?
I know that we only have you. We
got
for
9
a few
more minutes. Let me ask one.
We've got to get his website out there, and we've got to make sure that what's your website? So people that want to support you,
pulled up right here,
and we've got it on screen.
Yep, I'm going to put it on screen. And
if you are looking to, don't forget, people, that caucus is March 5th and that Brad Wilson is running. Are you running? Are you gathering signatures? Are you going convention only? Are you doing both?
Yeah, we're going to aggressively pursue both, like Senator Lee did a year before last. And you're seeing, I think it's kind of the way most people are going to look at this system moving forward. But we are going to aggressively work with delegates. And we'd love for people to go to our website, electbradwilson.com.
We got it up here.
Run as delegates. We'd love to have their support as state delegates. We'd love to have them sign up on our website to volunteer to help get the message out that what we need is someone that's got experience, that's a conservative fighter, is going to go back and not just be a big talker, but's got results. And
and Brad, I'm sure you agree that when people maybe don't have the money to assist you, their time is just as valuable. So if they're getting on the phone, if they're knocking on doors, if they want to get signage, if they want to run as a delegate, all these things are so important. And I will work with Alec to make sure that you get in front of our delegates at least 3 times. That's my personal goal. And we'll try to do that if it's town halls, via Zoom, if we do an in-person. I know that you know how the system works and that delegates can have that one-on-one with you, and so that we can push you into convention with a really positive look from the delegates. And please donate if this is somebody that you want to get behind. We're certainly excited. I know you've been out to the county a lot. A lot of people love you out here. And then, of course, I know you have another event, but please ask your question quickly.
So we've got Romney's comments the other day on how Trump is the cause for the border. And you're seeking to take that seat. Now, in my mind, Romney has, I don't want to say Romney has done us dirty, but Romney's been very divisive on matters conservative back east. And maybe we need that. I mean, it's better to have Romney in there than, I don't know, Schumer. I mean, it's, and it's good to have a left-wing person and a right-wing person to have that duality. But Romney's kind of done us dirty. And what are your thoughts on Romney saying that Trump is the cause for our border in conclusion?
Yeah, so I haven't seen what he said, so it's a little tricky for me to respond, but I'll just tell you this. I think it was the second to the last year Trump was president. A little over 200,000 people crossed the border illegally. 2.5 million crossed the border last year illegally. So I think the border was more secure under President Trump than it has been in the last year.
Well, 100%.
Well, and I think that you are a politician in the sense that you understand how all the backdoor politics work and caucus convention and everything. So you seeing yourself as having Trump as our nominee.
We lost Brad.
Dang it. He said Trump will be the nominee. And I think that implies that he would support Trump. And I'm sorry that we lost him. People, if you want to get to know Brad Wilson, we will have his website in the show notes.
In the show notes. You can go there right now and click on it. Root to his website. I'm sure we'll have him on again. Our call screener was not on yet. Otherwise, we'd have just tried to open it up for calls and not us asking him questions. I think it's better.
Just say though, David said, it looks like you're more excited than him. I can tell you this, the man has been all around this state and we've tried to get him on a few times, and he's from Washington County to Weber and he's running all over. He's probably exhausted, and we were excited that he could give us an hour.
He was talking about when I was talking about the lieutenant governor of Idaho. Yes, I like pirates. I don't understand the pirate mentality. She didn't put on a pirate cape and stuff. She's awesome. When the governor goes,
I remember she was bold.
The governor went to a meeting in Texas.
I know, he wasn't even gone very long.
She went and sat in the chair and said a whole bunch of negative COVID bills and pushed them through, forced these laws through while he wasn't looking.
Common sense sometimes.
I think that's awesome. That's what other, I mean, could you imagine, like right now, if Kamala Harris knew how to read and write, because it's not like Biden's president, she could put a whole bunch of laws through, but she doesn't know how to read and write, and she keeps losing all her staff. That's something we never talked about. Her staff just dumps and runs. They just, like, she lost her spokesperson 2 months ago and her head writer a month before that. She just keeps losing all her people. But that lieutenant governor, I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm saying I like it.
Well, I hope, please get online, look at these candidates' websites. In there, they put what their plan is, their experience, how you can help them, how you can contact them. And, delegates' job is to get in front of these people, ask them all these questions, to learn all they can. Well, if you're not wanting to be a delegate, please just take the time to just read up on them and see about them, because I hate for someone to go into a voting booth or sit on their couch in their mail-in, but without any idea of who these people are, and just picking whatever. We've got awesome candidates in the race. All of them have got some really positive things. This candidate has experience on the state level. This candidate has represented Utah values.
Well, he's also a speaker, so he's got that level of experience where he knows how to cultivate bills and how to make sure that once he gets that bill built up by whoever's putting it forward, it's ready to come to the floor. But anyways, so that's Brad Wilson. Go check him out. And again, just go to the show notes, click the little blue thing that says elect Brad Wilson, take you right to his website. Look it up, ask him questions.